welcome to our very first book chit chat. And today's topic is, why do authors do this? And today we are talking about, how do I put this? The sprinkling of a good romance, where they drip, drizzle, sprinkle, splatter, give us just enough information to be interested in this character's story, but they're a side character. And we're like, okay, well, when this book coming? When this book coming? And sometimes we still waiting.
Within a series.
10 books later, 10 years later, still ain't got this character's story. And so it's like, why do authors do this to us?
I know. I have one line. I love the author. She sprinkled somebody's story for a good 7 books. We were 17 books into the series. And so we got this person's story.
And how did that work out for you?
I don't think I ever read another book in that series after that.
It was that disappointing, huh?
It wasn't disappointing. Sometimes it's like it ruins it for you because it's like you're waiting for this one book and you're continuing to read and read and read as more and more books are released. And it finally comes and it feels like the end.
You're like, well, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
And then you have it where you finally get the book and it's forgettable. Completely forgettable. And you're
it's
like, well,
all the details in the previous books, and it's like they ran out of stuff by the time they got to the book.
Exactly. It's like, okay, well, you could have just left that information until we got to this book, because it didn't necessarily enhance the books it was in. It was telling me enough that, okay, I'm ready to read this. And then I get it. And I'm like, it's like nothing new or different. Kind of like they threw it out there just to get it done sometimes and not necessarily give us something different to the story.
Right. It's like you've already been told who they're going to end up with.
Mm-hmm.
Then you'll get details about each of the couple's like characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
You'll learn about something that happened in their life. And the thing is, it's like if they were to take that information away from the book, you wouldn't even notice. It wouldn't matter.
Yeah, it wouldn't make any difference to the focus of the story's love life or anything that's happening to them, because usually it's just an extra tidbit. Now, don't get me wrong. The best way to do this is you sharing additional tidbits about a couple that have already had a book. Yes, let me know what's happening.
Yes, that's the best way to do it, because it's like an extended epilogue, like a gift. You get to see like this couple that you've like made friends with in your mind. You get to see how their life continued after the great book you've already read about them. Yes.
And you know who does this and does it well? Shelley Lawrence.
Shelley Lawrence does it very well. Suzanne Wright does it really well.
Because even though we haven't had that couple's book in a while, and when I say while, it could be 10 books since that couple's book, she dropped just enough to get you back in the mindset of like, man, I haven't read their book in a long time. Let me go back and get it. Because you get that sprinkling, that dusting, and she gives enough that it doesn't take away from the current story. Although, depending on the story, that follow-up, those characters could have a big part in it, which makes it even better in my mind. But even if they just have a fly by night, it's done in such a way and so well that I'm like, oh, heck yeah, let me go back and get that book. I want to reread this story.
You are right. Like Shelley Lawrence is like terrific at doing that. Because I remember, you have Blaine's book. What's Blaine's name? Was it Beast Behaving Badly?
Yes.
That Blaine's. And like 5 books later, she like writes, oh, one of Blaine's kids is like running around the restaurant. And it like gave you enough new information to learn that like Blaine had all these kids since she hooked up with her mate like 5 books before. And then it makes you want to go back and reread the story again.
Exactly. And I did. That was what I did. I did go back and reread it because I was like, I love these two. I'm definitely going to reread this back. Even in the last book that just came out in August, she mentioned Blaine and not even by name. And she slipped it in, and you're like, well, I ain't read Blaine in a minute. All she said was this Black woman skating by and said something. And I'm like, oh my God, that's Blaine. I'm gonna go reread that story.
But you know, another like bad part of the sprinkling is when an author does a sprinkling of information for this book to come, and then they decide that they don't want to they don't want to give that character a book. So it's like you've really been just waiting in like false anticipation of something you're never gonna get.
And you know what? If they choose not to give the person a whole book, good and fine. But then you need to give a significant piece of their story in the other books. Right. Otherwise, you're leaving people hanging. Unless the next book is just going to be like, oh, he's married or she's married or they're together or whatever. You're just going to skip ahead. But that's also, it kind of like lets the readers down a little bit. Because when you build up something and have people anticipating something, and then you drop the ball or you change your mind, which as an author, you have every right to change your mind about how you want to write your characters.
Yes, I do. But sometimes like they build it up like so well. Like for instance, there is this book series that I was reading, and there are about 16 books in this series. And from book 3 through like 10 or 12, the author like mentions like this character, so we're waiting for him to get his book because like she's like, you know, mentioned it here and there, she's mentioned it there, like we're just waiting for them to hook up. And like the book, it never appeared. And she just mentioned like in one of the later books, the timing was bad, like they ended up not like getting it together. And you're just like, really?
For 10 books, you teased me.
For 10 books, you teased me.
And all you gave me was an unsatisfying, they didn't end up together.
Like I'm currently reading this motorcycle line, and the line is like hilarious. Like it's like 4 books in, and I love it. I'm rereading it now, and she's doing that sprinkling thing of one of the characters, and I feel like I have to do my own little personal boycott of the series. Like I cannot move on to the 5th book unless it's that character's book. And if the 5th book is not that character's book, I'm gonna wait until she releases that character's book, and then I'll just go back and read the missing books that I missed between now and that book.
Honestly, I don't blame you, because sometimes it can be frustrating. And as I was saying before, you know, as an author, yeah, you can change your mind, you could do things differently, or you can make them end up with somebody else perfectly fine.
Right.
But then you need to really think hard about doing this sprinkling method, because especially if you only do it with one pair and then that pair doesn't get a story, it's like, so why? Especially if the information that you provide about them has no real bearing on the stories you're throwing that into. It kind of is a big letdown for your loyal readers, because you give us this anticipation, you build and build and build, and then either, you know, a few things happen. One, you get the book and it's amazing, and then you're like, oh, thank God, this author killed it. Or you get the book and it's a letdown, maybe not as good as the other books in the series. Yeah. Almost like the author wrote it just to write it to satisfy the fans. But it's like, but you told us we were getting this book. We didn't ask for this book.
And I hate that. I was like, I'm one of those readers that, like, if you tell me that you're going to release the book, like, I'm looking for it. I'm waiting for it. You said this is going to be a book.
Exactly. Or the third way, which you mentioned, is they just either never write the book or give some lame excuse in a future book as to why that couple either is together, have moved completely past and never got a book, or never got together. And you know, we love, as fans of the romance genre, as fans of good writing, it's not fun. So this inaugural first episode of Why Do Authors Do This is why you get our hopes up and then dash it.
Yeah.
Why you dash it? You know, you could have just surprised us, and we knew nothing about it.
You could have just saved all those crumbs, kept all those crumbs to yourself, and put them to the side, and made like a whole book, a whole loaf of bread out of those crumbs.
Exactly.
Just giving it to us like when you're ready to give it to us.
100%. If ever, right? Because they could, because you could change your mind, but since nobody's expecting it, it wouldn't have caused no issues or no saddening of your poor readers like us. Because boy, there's nothing worse than a letdown.
Nothing worse.
Because half the time after that letdown, more than half the time, I never read another book by that author. I'm not even gonna lie.
And you know what? It is very, very rare for me to read like one of those sprinkling books, like the character who we've been waiting for. I rarely read it more than once.
Mm-hmm.
And I reread stuff like all the time, but those books, it's like, I
know. Or even the other worst part is when they do the sprinkling and the person happens to be a kid at the time that they start the sprinkling. Like the kid's story. They're a kid when she starts the sprinkling, and then they slowly start sprinkling the girl or even the boy as they get older and older and older. And now you're like, okay, what's gonna happen? Who they gonna end up with? Or if we know if that's a fated mate and they're just waiting for them to grow up or whatever. You're sitting here like, and then you finally get the book, like 5-8 years later, and you're like, you could have kept this.
Yeah, I do sometimes do 5-8 years later.
And you're like, you could have kept this. Because if I had known it was going to be real years and not book years, I wouldn't care.
Right? We thought you were going to speed their age up.
You out here having us thinking this person's kid and that person's kid going to end up together. I mean, just write me a YA version then, dang. They could be teens.
Yes. That's a perfect idea. Yes. Just create the separate line now. Give us the story.
or you going to wait till they grow up? Fine. I can wait. But don't disappoint. Don't write it lazily. Like if you're not going to put the oomph behind it as your regular books, you're just writing it because people are asking for it, don't write it.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Like, to their defense, like sometimes, like I have heard authors say that sometimes they never intended for certain characters to get books at all, but because the readers asked for it, they wrote it anyways. And now, like, I used to be one of those people that it'll be like maybe like a one-off book, maybe like not even like a part of a series, but I'll be like, oh man, I want this side character's book or that side character's book. And the author will write it and you'll be disappointed. And it's because they never intended for that to be a book. So it was kind of like almost like a throwaway for them. Yeah. So now, like, I no longer like, really push or wish to get those books. But if it's like a book already in their schedule that they've released, that's something different.
Right, exactly. Well, thank you for joining us today on our very first book chat. If there's other things that you think of, let us know in the comments. What do you think? Have you read a book and thought, why did the author do this? Let us know, because you know what? You might not be the only one with those same thoughts. So don't forget to like, subscribe, ring that bell to get our notifications of when our new videos drop. And feel free to let us know in the comments who are your favorite authors that do this well. And maybe some that might not do it as well as we would like. We're definitely interested in knowing, because as you know, we're always on the lookout for new authors. And hey, people that don't make us angry while reading, even better.
Yeah. See you later.
Stay blessed. Bye.